Hi there, my name is Jonathan McIntosh, and in this video I would like to talk to you about Javanese puppet plays, in particular wayang theatre. So the aims for this video are to discuss issues relating to characterization in wayang and also the different forms of wayang that are performed in Java. Then I'm going to outline the central role of the puppet master, the puppeteer, or the dalang, who in a wayang kulit or a shadow play performance, how he controls all aspects of such a performance. And then moving on from that, I want to examine the various musical elements in a wayang kulit performance. So to begin, what is wayang? Well, wayang is a series of various theatre forms that are performed in Java, but some of these forms are also performed in Bali. So wayang, the word wayang itself means shadow, and it originates from a form of shadow puppet play called wayang kulit. And kulit actually means skin, and it refers to the buffalo hide from which the various characters, or the puppet characters in a wayang kulit are made from this buffalo skin. However, there are also other forms of wayang theatre, and this includes wayang golek, which is a puppet play based on doll-like puppets. And there's also forms of wayang that involve human performers or human dance drama presentations, and these include wayang orang, orang meaning human, or wayang wong, which can involve some of the performers wearing masks. In all of these various forms of wayang, there are similar characters, structures, stories, and plots. And the majority, in some of these stories, the majority of characters, structure, stories, and plots are taken from the Indian epics, in particular the Mahabharata, but sometimes the Ramayana. But there are also Javanese stories that are used in some of these theatre forms, such as the tales of Prince Panji or other various tales. So let's just show you some pictures of these various forms. This first picture shows a wayang kulit performance, and here we have the puppet master or the dalang behind the screen, and you can see various buffalo hide characters there, and there's a light above the screen that casts shadows onto the screen and makes the characters look much bigger than they actually are. And we're going to discuss various aspects of this later in the video. Wayang golek refers to the doll-like puppets that are performed by the dalang. This form of puppetry doesn't use a screen, as in wayang kulit, because these doll-like puppets can't cast shadows in the same way as wayang kulit puppets. And then finally, moving on to wayang wong, and we can see here the various actors who are involved in portraying the characters in one of the stories. This particular performance is performed on a Western-like stage, where the characters actually talk during the performance, and we can see that because of the various microphones that are hanging above the stage in order to capture the vocal lines of the actors. So there are various types of characters in wayang kulit performances, and if you watch some videos or you read some of the literature, it becomes very apparent how specific characters are categorized in wayang performance. If we talk about wayang kulit puppets, the puppets that are made from the buffalo hide, these characters are fashioned in a very ornate fashion with very detailed and complex iconography. And just by looking at the characters and the forms and how they've been fashioned, it tells us an awful lot about different characters, even before the Dalang starts to voice the voices of these characters in performance and moves them in particular ways according to their character. So just by looking at a character in Wayang Kulit can tell us an awful lot of information. For example, hero characters such as princes and kings, they tend to always be halus or refined in Wayang Kulit performances. And these characters have very slow or slight movements, and the Dalang voices these characters using high-level language in Javanese. So Javanese that's used by people positioned at the top of the social hierarchy. So they use a very refined form of the Balinese language, and these characters that are halus speak with this refined form. In contrast to this, and at the other end of the halus kasar spectrum, ogres or giants or evil kings or animals, even some clowns, for example, adopt kasar characteristics. These characters move with quick and large movements, and they would use common forms of Javanese in performance. So let's take a look at some of these characters or these character types and see how we can differentiate them just by looking at the puppets. So this is a very famous character called Arjuna, who comes from the Mahabharata, one of the Indian epics. And Arjuna is a prince-like figure. He speaks in high Javanese and he moves with very precise, slow movements. But how can we tell this from just looking at the puppet? Well, we can see that he has a very thin body, and thin bodies in Wayang Kulit denote halus characteristics. We can also see in terms of his fingers that he has very long fingers, and he has a downward gaze, and he has very narrow eyes. These very narrow eyes and the downward gaze are other clues about the halus status of a character. In contrast, unrefined characters tend to have much larger bodies, and their eyes are a very big giveaway. So Karas characters tend to have very bulgy or large eyes, and these come through in the shadows that are cast on the screen in a performance. Sometimes also, in 3 of these 4 characters on the screen, the eyes actually look directly forward or out towards an audience. And this is another indication of the characters that are unrefined or karas. Eyes are a huge, big giveaway when it comes to Wayang Kulit performances, and also various forms of masked dance in Java and in Bali. So we can see the very narrow kind of eye in the top left-hand corner here that's very refined, and then an eye that's slightly more open, that might be more gaga, or a kind of male character who's situated between a halus character and a karas character. And then we have in the bottom left-hand corner, as we're looking at the screen, a very wide eye, and this would definitely be a karas indicator. And then there's also another eye that kind of looks a bit more in the bottom right-hand corner, a bit old, a bit tired, and that would denote a character of that type in Wayang Kulit. So in Wayang Kulit, one of the most important pieces of paraphernalia that's used in the performance is the screen. And the screen helps to separate backstage wayang, where you can see the puppets and you can see the musicians performing the presentation, and the shadows that are cast on the screen, and that tends to be known as the shadow side. So by looking at this picture, we can see many characters of puppets that have been positioned here. So in addition to the screen, which is a tight or a taut piece of fabric, usually that's positioned around a wooden frame, running along the bottom of the screen there are normally two banana logs, or the trunks of banana trees, although there's only one here in the picture. And banana tree trunks are very, they're full of water and they're very soft. And this then allows the puppet to be placed in the banana log. So at the bottom of each puppet, there's a fashioned kind of spike that's been made from buffalo horn, and that then allows the puppet to stand up in the banana log. The dalang sits in the middle of the screen, and to his right hand side he has all the alus and refined characters, and we can see these characters on the screen because they have predominantly black faces and small features, and the puppets that are more kasar in character-like, they're positioned to the left-hand side of the screen. And we can see that the faces of these characters are much bigger and they have bulging features. There's an important shadow puppet that's in the middle of the screen, and this is the Kayon, K-A-Y-O-N, and it's also sometimes referred to as the Gagunganan. And the Gagunganan symbolizes the mountain, which is a very important symbol in the Javanese and Balinese performing arts. And it can symbolize two things. It can symbolize the mountain, and it can also symbolize the tree of life. And this particular puppet is used right at the beginning of a shadow puppet theatre, and it's also shadow puppet performance, and it's also used to indicate scene changes, where the Kayon or the Gagunganan would be kind of waved across the screen by the puppet, and that symbolizes or signifies to the audience that that's a different screen, or we're moving on to talk about other characters in a wayang performance. In this screen, we can actually see the dalang, or the puppet master, moving the Kayon or the Gagunganan to signify the start of the performance or a scene change. We can also see the lamp that's positioned in the middle of the screen. Historically, this lamp would have contained oil, and it would have cast a flickering light onto the shadow, onto the screen, and this kind of made the shadows move a bit more in performance and brought them alive. With the transition to electric lights, it's a much brighter light, a kind of more kind of white light that's positioned onto the screen, and the shadows have kind of lost this flickery aesthetic, and that was for so long part of wayang kulit. But in order to cast shadows, the closer that you position one of the wayang kulit shadows towards the screen, the more from the other side, from the screen side of the screen, we can see the detail that's chiseled into these buffalo skin puppets. However, as you draw the puppet away from the screen, it casts a much larger shadow onto the screen. So puppets that are quite small can actually seem huge, and the detail on the buffalo hide starts to lose its focus. So actually manipulating these puppets is a great skill in and of itself. So the puppet master, or the dalang, is usually a man, but there are some women dalang. in Java and in Bali. And it should be made quite clear that the type of Wayang Kulit performances that I'm talking about in this performance relate to Javanese performance styles. There are some similarity, but for example in Bali there's a much smaller gamelan ensemble that accompanies a Wayang Kulit performance. Indeed, there are only 4 instruments as opposed to the many instruments that accompany a Javanese gamelan performance. And in Bali they can also have daytime Wayang that don't involve a screen but just involve a string, a piece of string that's taut in between 2 pieces of wood, and the puppets play behind this piece of string. So getting back to talk about the dalang, this is one figure who controls everything to do with this performance. And dalang, because of the many skills that are involved to become a proficient dalang, many dalang begin their training whilst they're still very young children, and they'll begin by maybe playing in the gamelan ensemble and learning how to manipulate puppets. Dalang tend to be hereditary positions, so a child will often learn to become a dalang because their father is a notable dalang. Today, many dalang complete their training by attending government performing arts colleges in Indonesia, and this is now seen as just a run-of-the-mill kind of training, and it also gives dalang a lot more prestige by attending and having a certificate or graduating from these colleges. Today, dalang tend to occupy very respected positions within Javanese society, and this is because of the many skills that are involved, and it's also reflected in the pay that dalang receive. So, whereas a dalang may receive hundreds of dollars for a performance, the musicians, who also play an important role in a Wayang Kulit performance, they tend to only receive a few dollars, if that, for the long hours of work that they put in to a Wayang Kulit performance. And because a dalang performs for such a long period of time in a performance, so a performance can last really anywhere for traditionally a performance would have lasted for 9 hours, from 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening to 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. However, today a dalang performance might be 2, 3, 4, 5 hours in length. Because of this, and because it involves such the development of dramatic narrative with the musical accompaniment, a dalang tends to want to work with his own group of musicians. And if, for a specific occasion, a dalang can't bring all his gamelan musicians with him, he'll bring 1 or 2 musicians with him so that they know how this dalang works and how these musicians can then help bridge the gap between the dalang and the other musicians who are accompanying the event. As I've said already, there are an enormous amount of skills that are involved in becoming a successful dalang, and because a dalang must become competent in these skills, this adds to the prestige that dalangs now have, or the star status that dalangs now have in Java, in Bali, and in Bali. So, for example, a dalang has to learn how to voice all of the different types of characters and learn all the different languages that are used and the languages that are associated with specific characters. So a dalang has to know Javanese as well as Old Javanese, or Kawi, which would be used by historical characters or characters positioned up the social ladder or the social hierarchy. He must also know ancient Sanskrit, which is a language that's not spoken in Java and Bali, but it comes directly from India. You must also speak Indonesian, not Indonesia, sorry for the mistake on the screen. And dalang also are increasingly conversive in English and other languages such as Japanese or German or French, for example, depending on their audience. And in some occasions, in order to develop some of the really coarse kind of speaking styles that characters require, there are stories of Dalang from the 50s and 60s that in order to train or break their voices, as children, they would be sent either to the beach or to waterfalls, and they would just be expected to scream, okay, at the waves coming in off the beach or as the water was falling over the waterfall. And this would help to kind of mature the voice so that Dalangs can develop the very kind of some of the very deep sounds or guttural sounds that they need to use in a performance. Dalangs also use stock phrases in relation to particular characters, and by using stock phrases, this allows for a certain amount of improvisation within the structure of specific stories or plots. Of course, in using the term improvisation, we don't use this lightly. You would never have a high caste or a character positioned at the top of the social hierarchy speaking in low Javanese or low Balinese, for example. So even though there are stock phrases, Dalang still has to know the levels or the hierarchies of characters and how they speak in performance. What are the different linguistic registers that are used in relation to the social status of each character? So Dalang has to remember all this in a performance and has to react instantaneously on the spot. And Dalang also has to manipulate these characters in a particular way. So characters move depending upon their social type and social character. And he has to develop the skills in order to manipulate these puppets so that they look like they're actually alive when the shadows are cast on the screen. So we've discussed the different types of characterization to do with wayang and wayang kulit in particular, and we've also discussed the Dalang and how you control the performance and the particular skills that are required for wayang kulit presentations. So now let's talk about the musical structure or the different musical elements that are important, particularly in relation to wayang kulit. So in a wayang kulit performance, no matter whether it's a 9-hour performance or a 2-hour performance, there are 3 parts or patet, and these are type of kind of episodes, even though the patet has another meaning that we'll discuss in a minute. So on the screen, I've kind of divided a wayang kulit according to a kind of 9-hour performance. So part 1 from 9 p.m. to midnight. This tends to be quite slow moving and it's very serious. It's often set in a palace or a court setting. And during these 3 hours, a problem is raised. Okay, so this becomes the issue that's going to be addressed in the wayang kulit performance. And then in the second part, or the second patet, from midnight to 3 a.m., this is where the protagonist or the hero of the story appears, and he usually appears in a forest or in mountains, and there's a mission that he has to solve in relation to the problem that's been raised in the first part. Accompanying the protagonist are his servants or clowns, and these servants or clowns play a very important role by translating the often high caste language of the protagonist into everyday speech so that everyone can understand what's going on. Because not everyone watching in the audience can speak high Javanese or even have a knowledge of old Javanese, which is Kawi or Sanskrit. So clowns and servants play a very important role because they're everyday common characters and they translate everything into a language that the audience can understand. And they also tell jokes and sing songs, and they're very funny characters and everyone laughs at these. And laughter is a very important part of a wayang kulit performance. Then in the third patet, or the third part from 3 o'clock to sunrise, this is a very action-packed section of the performance, so there are lots of battles and fights between good characters and kind of more evil type characters, and there's lots of loud gamelan playing. And then just before sunset, the problem that was raised in the first part is resolved. Oh, sorry, going back to this slide, I should just say that if it's a condensed wayang performance, for example, say a 2-hour performance or a 3-hour performance, it still has 3 parts that relate to what I've just outlined, but obviously the action moves a bit more quickly than in a 9-hour production. So, in a wayang performance, there's usually a full gamelan behind the screen, behind the dalang. However, the musical accompaniment is almost always primarily in the slendro laras or tuning system. But we have all the instruments of the pelog slendro gamelan in order to show that the gamelan is complete. Because it's slendro, there are different modes or patets that are aligned with each of the 3 parts of the performance. So in the previous slide, patet referred to an episode or the part of a puppet performance, but patet also means musical mode. So modes are the various sequences of pitches that belong to the slendro tuning system. And in Java, in the slendro tuning system, there are 3 patet, and as the performance moves on, the pitch or the tessitura of the patet gradually rises throughout the performance. So it begins at the lowest pitch or tessitura in slendro, which is patet nam, and then it moves up to patet slendro, and then patet manura, which is the final patet. The dalang also sings modal non-metric songs, which are called suluk, and these suluk help to establish the mood and the patet at the start of each section or part. In relation to the musical accompaniment, the way that the puppets move is very important. So the puppets' movements tend to coincide with the gongin and the collatomic structure of the music. So in a battle scene, there'll be lots of fighting and be tara 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 tara, and then go kapla, where a puppet might punch another character or might kind of kill another character with a sword, for example, and this kapla or this punching of a character would coincide with the striking of the gong. So again, another example of points of coincidence in Javanese gamelan music. Within a wayang performance, the chiblong dance drum reinforces the action that's on stage, and this is the medium-sized barrel-shaped drum that's used in a gamelan ensemble. And here is the chiblong drum, and it's one of 2 instruments that are very important in a wayang kulit performance. So again, the chiblong drum helps to regulate time and drive a performance, and the gender helps to accompany the suluk songs that are sung by the dalang in order to establish the patet of each of the 3 sections. And if dalang can't take all of his musicians, he will endeavour to at least take his drummer and his gender player, because they're so important in understanding how a dalang works. And again, they can help communicate how the dalang works to the other musicians. A dalang also makes sound effects during a performance. So if voicing the puppets, moving the puppets, controlling the musicians was not enough, he creates sound effects. He does this by using a small wooden hammer called a chimpala, and this can either be knocked against the keprak, which is the wooden box in which the puppets are stored, Or he can knock the chimpala against a series of bronze plates that are held together with string. And these bronze plates are called kaprak, not. So, kaprak is the puppet box. Kpyak is the bronze plates. And they can be hit with the chimpala. And the chimpala can either be held in the hand, or it can be positioned between the big toe and then the second big toe, and that hits against the box, or the kpyak. There are also, in fight scenes or battle scenes, there are short beat belungans, so 2 or 4 beat gong cycles that are used, such as shepegan or sampak. And these short cycles are used in wayang kulit, particularly in battle scenes, because they can end quite quickly, be brought to a short conclusion so that the action can then move on. So in a wayang performance, the dalang controls not only the puppets but the music and all of the musical cues. And there are 5 real different methods for cueing that he or she uses. So in the last slide we talked about the chimpala, the wooden hammer, and this can perform various patterns called jojogan, and these denote various pieces or how to move on in the drama. Particularly, a constant tap 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 against the wooden box will tell the musicians, right, we're moving on, play the next piece. Wayang also depends upon standard musical pieces or compositions, and all musicians tend to know these. So a dalang can cue these pieces very quickly. And performances, for example, always tend to open with the same type of music. A dalang can also sing the introduction or the buka of a particular piece, and by singing the buka, the musicians know, right, we're going to play piece X now. Clients can also offer to sing a piece, so clients could say, we're going to sing piece Y, and then that's another cue. Oh, the musicians get ready to play piece Y. And the dalang can also sing wangsalang, and these are kind of riddle lyrics that serve to introduce various pieces. So they can play, a play on words helps to introduce particular pieces to the musicians and the audience. So, what have we discussed in this video? We have discussed various forms of characterization in several types of wayang and how they're related to the alus-kasar dichotomy. We've outlined how the central role of the dalang and how he controls all aspects of the performance, and he has to develop many, many skills in order to do this, and that reflects his social status or star status now in Java. And we've examined some of the musical elements of a wayang kulit performance, including those to do with structure, as well as important instruments and sound effects made by the dalang in performance.